Hi folks, this is All the Fruit. I am on the beautiful island of Tenerife, above the village of Masca, which is probably the most beautiful and most incredibly situated village on the whole island of Tenerife. And I want to do another video about the incredible agriculture of the Canary Islands. A type of agriculture which I call agriculture at the limit. Well, Masca is one of the very few villages on the southwestern slopes of the Tenerife Mountains. It's by far the biggest and most famous one. There are a couple tiny ones which consist just of a few houses. Masca at least has 1 or 2 dozen houses. Well, nowadays the main business of this village is tourism, but of course hundreds of years ago when it was founded, tourism didn't exist in this form. Actually, this road was only built, I think, about 60 years ago. Before that you could reach Masca only by donkey trails. But how did those people survive here? I mean, if nobody else wanted to live here, in those almost vertical slopes and cliffs, how did they survive? Well, around the village, of course, there are a couple places where you can plant potatoes and other vegetables. Also, they have a lot of date palms around the village, which are not the African date palm, but mostly, or I think even exclusively, the Canary Island date palm. But I'm gonna make another video about them. They are also very important for the village's survival. But of course, those teeny tiny fields and orchards around the village were not enough. So how did those people survive here? Well, remote and inaccessible wasn't necessarily bad in the Canary Islands for centuries. They were a colony of Spain, and Spain did exploit those poor starving people, well, until they starved. Didn't matter if you starved, as long as you paid your taxes, everything was okay. If you didn't pay your taxes, you went to prison. So a remote, inaccessible, poor village which could be reached only by donkey trail wasn't that bad. But yeah, what did they survive on? Well, of course, they had goats here. All those mountains have been heavily grazed by goats for centuries, maybe even for millennia, maybe even before the advent of the Spanish. And probably part of those mountains was laurisilva, or at least some dry forest. But let's see what else they have except for goats. Let's see if we can find some remnants of agriculture here on those almost vertical slopes. Well, what do we see there? A couple teeny tiny terraces and beehives. Yeah, bees were one way to get something sweet. Another way were those date palms which were milked for their sweet sap. I think Masca is the only place on Tenerife where this is still allowed. Everywhere else it's forbidden because they are protected species. A third plant you could use for its sweet sap was the agave down there. Those silvery, grayish, silverish, whitish plants. You would use them for fibers, of course, but you could also use them, well, basically the bud of the plant you can roast it and obtain something that's edible, although in this species that's not too nice. Or you could use it to get a sweet sap, similar like from the palms which are near the village. Or you could, of course, make a lot of stuff like tequila and mezcal. You can drink from it. Another plant we see everywhere here is the prickly pear. Well, we see it here on the steep slope, and we also see it on the cliffs above it. However, if you look a little bit further away from the steep slope, there is no prickly pear on the cliffs. Where does this prickly pear come from? Well, the prickly pear on the cliffs, the cacti, they come basically from birds which ate the fruit and dropped the seeds in the cliffs. But why only on those cliffs? Why not on the cliffs a couple 100 meters further away? Well, because the prickly pear was planted here on this almost vertical slope. Yeah, parts of this slope were terraced I can still see a couple terraces there. I think there are a couple destroyed terraces down there. I guess everywhere where there were terraces, there was some sort of well, cultivation of most probably grains here. Also some of the almonds, all those shrubby trees you see here are almonds. Some of them grow on terraced land, some would grow, well, basically wherever they would grow. The people would plant them everywhere and hope that they survive. They would plant them on the steep slope. So those are the three different, well, you could call them, you cannot all call them fruit trees, although the agave was also used to obtain some sweet sap. But basically those are the three agricultural plants I could still see here. The agave, the prickly pear cactus, which was used mostly for the cochineal lice, and the almonds, which were a staple of this area and which were also exported. And of course the bees, and as I said, I guess that the terraces here were also used for grains, maybe not for potatoes, a little bit too little water here for potatoes, for grains, and I don't know what, maybe they did try some vegetables here. And this place is still not completely abandoned. I mean, the beehives are still there, and on the road there is a little private parking spot. So the owner of this land, or somebody who is using this land, is still coming here, at least for the bees. So folks, this was some agriculture on the limit here near the spectacular village of Masca. I think now I will walk down there. I got a couple kilometers with a heavy backpack. Okay, it's gonna be fun to see what type of interesting and unique agriculture this most spectacular village in all of the island of Tenerife has. By the way, since we are already here on the background, the island of La Gomera and the island of La Palma, which also have a lot of really unique and spectacular agriculture. So folks, stay tuned for a lot more fruit videos from the incredibly beautiful Canary Islands. And don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe.